So let's go to a panel discussion, and let me open it up to the panel. And now we have. Let me start with the first question to Dr. Bedi, because Dr. Malay Patel has serious issues with the internet connection in Ahmedabad, and there's a lockdown there. So anyway, Dr. Bedi, I would ask you about your, the therapy of sclerotherapy. How do you do? When is it indicated? How do you choose a patient for a foam sclerotherapy over endovenous laser therapy or surgery?
See, basically, our first line of therapy generally is endovenous ablation, and foam we will be using one for below knee, and two for very tortuous and multiple segments which the laser cannot reach. We are not personally proponents of primarily sclerotherapy. I know that there are people who prefer sclerotherapy over endovenous ablation, but we have at least seen, or at least in the various trials, that the results of do not match in the great saphenous vein the results of endovenous. So I would use sclero as an adjunct, and basically when there are multiple tortuous channels, or the laser cannot reach, or it is a below knee. So these are my limited indications for sclerotherapy, but I would not hesitate to add it on to endovenous ablation.
Yeah, so most of us actually use it for residual collaterals after good ablation of the great saphenous vein and short saphenous vein, or if you have a recurrence. But Rahul, what is your take on this?
Yes, I think that's a very Dr. Bedi has already summed it up, and but I personally feel that in countries like India, foam has got a fantastic role. So when I go and do the sessions in the government hospitals, especially, I teach them less of laser and more of foam. Because getting a laser done in the government hospital for long saphenous vein, or especially for any varicosities, is very expensive. It's not cost effective. So foam can be used as a primary treatment for actually all the varicose veins, if you know how to do the foam. And it's not very, very difficult to teach the people. The only drawback for foam is that if you are not careful, then you can got some thrombophlebitis, which you can recover. That's not a big deal to do. But the second is, it's a recurrence. So if you look at the long saphenous ablation with laser, it goes up to 99% if you do it properly. But with the foam, it will drop down to 70 to 75%. But you can do the foam again. That's not a problem, because what will happen is the cost of doing the foam, especially in countries like India, actually can be nearly less than $10, and which you cannot achieve with a laser. So especially I feel that foam should be the first line of treatment in the government hospitals if you're not doing an open surgery, especially in countries like India. Second, most of the indications you have already covered, but we also use foam in venous malformations. Very important patients, we use foam as a treatment, and then we also use it for pelvic congestion, and as a we first inject the alcohol, then we put in the foam, and then we put in some coils. So we use a combination of foams there. And you can also use a diluted foam for cosmetic varicose veins, which we use.
I think the very good saying, which is a favorite of my friend Malay Patel, is that sclero is an art waiting for its science. So I think we still have to learn a little bit more about it, and definitely the people who use it swear by it. So definitely the first choice in recurrences, as Rahul said, but otherwise I would be, it would not be my first choice otherwise.
And is there a limitation to the amount of foam you're using per sitting? And especially it sometimes could be a little dangerous. There have been reports if you have a PFO, you can have brain infarcts and some transient loss of vision. Those have been reported. So especially if you are using large amount of foam, Rahul, what is your take? Can you do it as a primary therapy for large GSV incompetence plus perforators?
You can do it.
In terms of the volume.
Yeah, I'll answer both these questions. These are very important questions. You see, sclerotherapy is a similar, like Harinder said, it's an art. So you should not think that just take up the volume and just inject it into the vein. That then you will create a huge amount of complications with foam. It's a sclerosant. So you have to learn how to use it. You just cannot do it blindly. Second is you can use it any vein. So we get a lot of poor patients also. So we have actually got a similar results to laser at 6 months, with repeated, injections of foam with a very cheap treatment. And so you can actually treat any vein with foam also. So there are techniques how to use it. There are various techniques how to use the foam. It's not just injections. Third is in terms of volumes. I have used maximum volumes of more than 50 ml foam in one sitting. So I don't see the foam volume is a problem. It's the problem is if you will inject a 50 ml volume in 5 minutes. So you are going to, of course, cause a problem. Is you have to inject slowly. You have to inject under ultrasound guidance. So some patients, you get the whole leg is full of veins. How will you treat that? So sometimes you require, approximately 20-25 ml of foam in one leg. And this is, we have done like hundreds of patients, not only 2 or 3, hundreds of patients in the last 20 years. And we actually, touch wood, luckily we never had some issues. But when you inject so much high volumes of foam, then you have to do few things separately. One is you need to push the patients on IV fluids we put in. Second, you need to inject slowly. Third is these patients from the table should not be made to walk because these patients will feel dizzy for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. So we put them on the stretcher, make them lie down for 10 to 15 minutes, and then the effects of that goes off.
And I believe a good way, also a safer way, is to raise their legs for some time, maybe 15-20 minutes. And also, if you have a light tourniquet, that actually avoids foam traveling upwards towards the heart and risk of brain embolism if there is a PFO, which is not very uncommon. 3 to 5% patients in general, people in general population do have PFOs, especially guys with migraine. Okay, so let's now take, we have a lot of questions which are coming to me. Let me just take it through the panelist. This is the question for you, Dr. Divyang, he's from US. Now, what are your tips and tricks for doing a good, successful endovenous laser therapy? What we do at our place is we tend to go as distal as possible, go and have a access near the ankle. What is the practice in the United States? Because I see a lot of people in the OPD vein clinics actually do it just below the knee and then they call it day.
Right. So, by the way, thank you for inviting me. Excellent talk, Dr. Jindal, on laser physics. Very easy to understand. And Dr. Amira, that was a fantastic talk on overview of EVLT therapies. In the US, most interventionalists will probably either with EVLT or RFA go just below the knee. I personally am more aggressive. I try to go lower calf or ankle. The main risk becomes, if you're treating the long saphenous injury to the saphenous nerve and if you're treating the small saphenous injury to the sural nerve. But as long as you maintain aggressive tumescent anesthesia, I think that's very key. Then you will reduce the risk for paresthesias and nerve injuries. I think in my practice, I've had, I think, 2 long-term nerve injuries out of about 500 patients. So that's the main risk, is paresthesias and long-term neuropathy.
Yeah, especially do you go for lowering the wattage or the energy as you come down from knee level down to the ankle? Because that's what
I generally don't. I generally keep the same. I mean, you could reduce the energy with modern lasers. I think, you could reduce the fluence and the lead as you go down towards the ankle. But in my experience, what I rely on most is aggressive peritumescent and perinervous. Once you infiltrate the saphenous compartment with tumescence, you really see the nerve quite well. And I try to go around the nerve with my tumescence. So I try to tumesce the nerve as much as I tumesce the vein, depending on how low I need to go. And once I do that, then I think that not only do you have a very successful procedure, no patient complaints, but I think the risk for complications goes quite down as well.
Yeah,
I think I agree with Divyang regarding the nerve. You can actually, if you have a good ultrasonographer or yourself, you're well trained, you can actually see the nerve. And then you can inject the tumescent and separate the nerve from the vein. So it's not very easy, I know. But
I
if
think-
you are going to do below knee, then that you should be looking for the nerve
Right.
also.
I think if you want to treat anywhere below the mid calf, you must identify the nerve.
Yes.
Especially from the small saphenous compartment. I think you have to identify the nerve. And you almost always can. If you can't see it initially, then you should be able to see it once you put in the tumescence, because that creates the sonolucent window to see the nerve.
And do you get your punches 100% of times, or you sometimes have to do and open the vein surgically? I mean, in my practice, at least 10% of the patients I would open them near the ankle, and it's just like a small stitch, one little nick, and then you just pick it up and go there.
Right. We
And that,
generally
a lot of my fellows, actually try to do venous access first, and they mess up the vein. So, and then it's very difficult to get that vein at that position. So
Right.
we go up and take it out.
So what I generally teach fellows is try to go, you try to access at the very most caudal aspect. So if you miss your access and you spasm the vein, then you can always move higher. It's more difficult to move lower once that vein becomes thrombosed and spasmed. In terms of phlebectomy, we only tend to do that, if there's a patient with recurrent bleeding or an active wound that's overlying the vein and you can't access that site. But in general, I think most individuals are able to access that vein pretty successfully, especially after you put some nitroglycerin cream on the skin. It dilates the vein under that. And just start as low as possible, go gentle, use a micropuncture system. And I think we should be able to do it pretty well.
See, there has been a little change in the thinking of how proximal you can go. Normally, the convention is that you go up to the SFJ and then withdraw 2.5 centimeters. But recently, there is something called laser corsectomy, where they try and go as close to the SFJ as possible. So I would like to know the opinion of Rahul and Divyang on this. Would you do a laser prostatectomy, which resembles a surgical prostatectomy?
Thank you, Dr. Bedi. We have been doing laser prostatectomy from 2 years now. And I'll answer this question first. A lot of the patients, because we have been operating for 20 years, these laser varicose veins. So a lot of these patients, they come back after 4 to 5 years with an insufficiency of the anterior saphenous vein. So why this happens is because you leave the SFJ junction open. So the flow, instead of the long, because you already closed the long saphenous. So then the flow from the SFJ goes into the anterior accessory saphenous vein. So a lot of publications were there that the most common cause for recurrence after laser was an anterior accessory saphenous vein incompetence. So we actually, in our own setup, so we were treating around 3 patients every month with an recurrence. So when 2.5 years back, we were in one of the conferences, and there we decided, why don't we should try doing the laser crossectomies. So 2.5 years back, we started doing the laser crossectomy. So we've done more than 250 patients with laser crossectomy now. And luckily, none of our patients had a deep venous thrombosis. There is a technique to do it, how you do have to do it. You need to be very good in ultrasound. And, I feel all the patients who has got a huge saphenofemoral junction, laser crossectomy should be performed. And that we do it as a routine practice now. There are a lot of publications which has been happened on laser crossectomy, and it shows that you get reduced recurrence into the ASV. But there are 2 things against it. One is, if you have not done enough cases, and if you are not good in ultrasound, you can easily cause a deep venous thrombosis. Second is, none of the guidelines mention that you should do a laser crossectomy and prevent an ASSV. Third is, we don't have the long-term results of laser crossectomy. Fourth is the medical legal issues. So if you cause a DVT, after doing a laser crossectomy, nobody will protect you. But if you have 2 centimeters away and you got an ASSV recurrence, so nobody will say anything to you because that is the reported recurrence rate in the literature. So I feel laser crossectomy should be done only in the controlled studies, only by the really experts, people who are doing varicose veins left and right, unless we have data published, huge data is published to include it into the guidelines. Because we still don't know which patient we should do the laser crossectomy, which patient we don't. Second is point I wanted to make to Divyang is, we have done around 8,000 cases up to now. I will not like to do any punctures below the knee. Maximum, I will like to do maximum up to that point. In last 16 years, I have not done a single open access to the vein. Okay, and there are a lot of techniques how to can get over it. But if you look into all the guidelines published, there are nowhere in the literature which shows that you should do the ankle puncture and should do the laser below the knee. There are publications which are there, but the guidelines are not there. So,
right.
There is a difference between that. There are a lot of techniques. As an expert, you can get away with it by doing the puncture, doing the laser below the knee. But I don't see in my practice in so many years that why do you need to do the laser below the knee? And except if you cannot do the puncture at the level of knee, that's a different story. But still, in that case, also you should do the laser up to the knee and then do the foam in rest of through the same catheter, you can do the foam. Because if you have a paresthesia, we had one paresthesia 13 years back. I can't tell you that patient really made my life hell for 6 months. And I was just praying that she gets away from me somehow. And from that 13 years, we have never had a patient. And I think it was a bad luck because we were doing laser was not being done very commonly in the short saphenous vein. We did the laser, and from that point, I modified my technique of giving tumescence. I don't know, because you don't know how do you get a tumescence. How do you get a paresthesia? Is it from the laser? Is it from the nerve injury? Or whatever. I modified my technique is that all nerves are lateral to the vein, you will see on the ultrasound. They're never anterior to the nerve, to the vein. So all tumescence I give, and I teach people, is always put in the needle in front of the vein, anterior. So I'd never take the needle by which I give the tumescence on the side of the vein. So I go into the saphenous sheath anterior to the vein, and you see a hollow going around the vein, and all nerves will get separate. You don't need to actually see anything. And either you do it from the ankle or you do it from the knee. So, by which you are able to do a very good tumescence and separate the nerves, even if you want to do it below the knee.
Okay, I have, and anybody of you does lasers in cath lab? I do all my lasers in the cath lab.
We got a hybrid lab, so we do all lasers in hybrids.
Okay, so you require imaging.
No, I don't do imaging, but I'm saying we do it in the cath lab. You said we do it in the cath lab, yes.
Because I rely more on ultrasound to get a venous access.
Yeah,
and to be sure of my tumescence.
Yeah,
we started laser in 1998 after I came back, and we have a series of 6,800 patients now. Our techniques are a little different because we were not so good in ultrasound techniques, so we started in the cath lab and we continued. And I think there are some advantages in doing it in the cath lab. Yes, ultrasound is a must because you require to get in at the right position. You require a very good tumescent anesthesia, separate the nerves, have a good cushion all around. That is a must. So apart from that, we do an angiogram. An angiogram actually gives us a very good, idea about the tortuosity, about which vein to enter and how to track the guide wire there. And we use guide wires from 014 to 018 to Terumo 35 Terumos. So we have almost never had any problems with tortuosity because with our coronary techniques, we can go to any tortuosity with angulated, micro catheters and then get up and change the wire and then get the sheath up. So that's never been a problem, like doing two punctures or doing doing it above knee laser and below knee foam, or like doing it separately. Also, what it does, it is many a times able to identify the accessory nerve, veins and duplication of the veins, sometimes, and we can go and ablate that also. Even the perforators, we can do it. We can do it with a good ultrasound also. We can do the perforators as well in the same sitting. So, we always want that. And the second thing is we published a few years back, we published a report, and which was published and presented in Sky, that on our coronary side, once we did not have this endovascular lithoplasty and the rotas were not very common. One of the ways to break the calcium during angioplasty used to be that you fill the artery with the contrast and give laser. So it
Right.
creates so much of micro bubbles that it blasts off the calcium, and then it's very easy to put in a stent because the artery is supple. We sort of use the same technique and same principle and try to look at how it works in the vein. And to our surprise, I mean, if you do that in your experimental thing also, you take water and you take a contrast and you put in laser and see the amount of micro bubbles which are created and microblasts which are created. We got it studied in IIT Delhi, and we did this small study, and we found that contrast-filled empty vein without blood or with less of blood, and with a contrast, if you inject, if you fire laser there, you actually create more injury and more intimal damage. And it led to a stronger fibrosis and less recurrence. So that is what we did in our study, and we presented in SCAI meeting and also published this. Now it's become our regular practice that, whenever we are doing it, we see the vein in front of us. We do a good vein emptying by, raising the leg, giving cold tumescent instead of normal tumescent, and it compresses the vein and having external compression. And then doing this procedure with a contrast-filled vein. And I think our results are better. In terms of below knee, we definitely come down on the energy. We are very careful with tumescent. I mean, I am always worried about paresthesia, but till now we haven't got any. But I think I have a feeling, I am not too sure, but maybe I'll take the opinion of Sandeep and you and also Divyang and Dr. Shastri, whether, I mean, I think the chances of recurrence are much lower if you're doing the complete segment in one sitting. And if you are doing it all the way from, say, mid-leg to all the way up to little below the saphenofemoral junction. So I'll leave it open. This is how we do it. And maybe if Divyang, you have an opinion, Sandeep, you have an opinion, or Dr. Shastri, who is a vascular surgeon at our place, if they have an opinion on this.
Yeah, what you said is correct. I operated with number of times with you, and the technique that we are using is very good. And with this one, Newt one, we are very successful, and paresthesia is never there in any of the cases.
Dr. Shastri is, he's been trained in US. He's also a cardiovascular surgeon. He still works in Mass General, and he also working with us. So many of our procedures are done together, and he's been like, he would sort of, what I'm saying, that he's seen me doing all this. And he almost never we have used general anesthesia or a spinal anesthesia. We always do it under just a tumescent anesthesia and mild sedation.
Absolutely, that is good. Very good results also. And we are not...
we haven't done a controlled trial on this, so I can't be very, sure that this is what it is. But I think the recurrence is much less, and paresthesia doesn't happen if you are very good of your tumescent anesthesia. Divyang, you have a say on this?
I agree. I also do mine under just tumescence, and we typically give some midazolam. But in terms of paresthesias, I think you have to be aggressive with the tumescence, and you have to be careful in identifying the nerve. Going back to Dr. Jindal's point, there are many operators who will give the tumescence directly anterior to the vein. My preference, I always go circumferentially. I first coat the entire vein 360 with the tumescence, and then I make it a point to go and identify that nerve. I hunt it down, and then I coat the nerve with tumescence. And then if I have to be aggressive, in many patients, the GSV will become quite dilated from the mid-calf to the foot. Above the mid-calf, it may not be very dilated, but in many patients, there is segmental reflux that is most prominent at the lower calf, and that is usually the junction. That is usually the area where they're most symptomatic. So those are the patients that I go a bit more aggressive, and especially if they have a wound, then I think that you have to go as close to the wound as possible. But that is my technique, and I think if you are good at identifying that nerve on ultrasound real time and tumescence, then I think the risk for paresthesia goes quite low.
And do you have problems? Do you do like 2 punches if in a very tortuous vein, or you use your interventional skills and get through a guide wire and just thread the vein all the way up? Because
in the US, it becomes when we use, I have the lab, the cath lab within the same office complex. So if in the US it becomes cost prohibitive to use our advanced interventional wires, the commands and the V18s to cross the tortuosities. So I usually do a double puncture. I'll puncture both, if I have to cross a tortuosity that the laser catheter or the RFA catheter won't make it through, then I will go above that area of tortuosity. And if that open segment in the middle becomes a problem, then bring them back and sclerose it. But I do the double puncture quite often. Yeah.
Because normally we avoid, and we have, almost always I can get through. And sometimes you need to ask your assistant to pull that segment.
Correct. Yes.
It's like the vein may look very bad or tortuous in the normal position, but if you guys pull it apart, you can actually straighten it segment by segment and get your.
Sometimes even a simple maneuver, just bending the leg or straightening the leg, will let your catheter go through. So I think the majority of the time we're able to treat the entire length without any skip segments and without having to use our advanced wires.
Sandeep, what's your practice in Nepal?
Sir, the first choice is always going from the ankle, the access. And if there is some obstruction, we go high. And even if I don't get access in thigh, I also sometimes comes down, retrograde from the groin. But anyhow, I ablate it. But I don't ablate below the knee, always above knee. Yeah, so I have very less paresthesia.
Always above knee. Is that right?
Yeah, ablation, yeah. I don't come below the knee. I do a sclerotherapy after that.
Okay.
Because maybe 5-6 years back, I have one case with paresthesia. I was coming several times. So from then, I always ablate only till the knee. Below the knee, I always give foam sclero.
What about recurrence, especially below knee recurrence?
Recurrence is not much, but some patients are coming with recurrence who are not wearing a stocking, some obese patients or some ladies who are planning pregnancy. But that not much common. Yeah, some branches are just tributaries recurrence where I do repeat sclerotherapy. Maybe they come after 1 year or 2 years, but not like recurrence from the groin.
And yeah, but still, the venous hypertension does exist in the below knee, in the leg and the foot. And these patients still have a lot of symptoms if you don't do it all the way down because of collaterals. And I know I've read literature.
No, I do the sclerotherapy till the ankle.
Maximum amount of venous hypertension comes from the saphenofemoral valve only. But we have seen segmental refluxes and high venous hypertension below the knee.
So, I do the patient maybe like even 8 or 9 sclero, maybe that's like 16 to 18 ml in the same sitting. But slowly, not at the same time. Maybe I take maybe extra 20-30 minutes for that. So normally they all are good occluded.
So basically, all of you agree, including Rahul, that you need to treat as below as possible. Only the way you treat it may be different. You don't want to use laser.
Yeah.
You do want to treat that. And I think, but I don't
agree with this, Dr. Khanna. Sorry, I didn't say that. I think it was
foam at that place.
No. Sorry, I think it was mistaken. I treat only the refluxing segments. And if the long saphenous vein below the knee is normal, I will not treat it. So I will treat, because I don't puncture, I mark the veins beforehand, and I will treat only the segments which are refluxing. So let's say if you have a long saphenous SFJ junction incompetence from the top, and my refluxing point gets out at the level of knee into the varicosities, and I check on ultrasound, the rest of the long saphenous below that is normal. I will not treat that, not even a foam. Of course, why not? Why will I treat it? Because that's a normal vein. And I will just treat the laser from top to the knee and will inject around 1 ml of foam into the varicosities which are prominent over there. That's it.
Okay. So, any other questions, or we close the session now? I don't see.
It's 1 o'clock.
Just a comment before you close it.
Actually, the last session is always like this. Yesterday we had an event. Nobody wanted to leave, I think still there must be a lot of people, I see on the same panel itself, the guys who have got rights to be on the panel, there are about 141, but there'll be so many more who are just listening.
So Dr. Khanna, before we finish, I think I represent all your attendees and panelists and colleagues in telling you that this has been a really awesome presentation and it's been totally unconventional. And I think this is going to be the near normal now, new normal. And on Facebook, you get what you had a year back. And today only I got pictures of last year when we had all of us were there. I think all of us sitting here were there. And that was a fantastic, different type of conference. So kudos to you and hats off for having pulled this off and created
a good number of attendees
for the rest of us. Thank you.
A lot of hard work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Divyang. Thank you, Dr. Bedi, Rawal, and Amira, and Dr. Pandey.
Thank you, Dr. Khanna. I'm sure you had a successful conference.
I know. Yeah, we had a good one. We had 25 hours of deliberation and real good one. We had everybody in vascular surgery and cardiology who attended.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes, sure.
Can you share your diet plans or something like that? How do you get so much energy so that we can, cut into that? At least maybe 50%. Don't share the whole plan. Maybe only the 50%.
Divyang knows my diet.
I have seen him eat, and it's very simple. Not much.
But Rawal, actually, I was about to ask you the same thing. You look so fresh, and you look the same for last 15 years. Right from my first Apway.
No.
You would agree, Dr. Bedi. You would agree with this.
Definitely.
I get tired.
Not even, you have not put on even maybe half a kg weight since I saw you.
Weight I have not put in, but I get tired now. At 9 o'clock, I get tired now.
Okay, see you. Sorry for holding you on. And
See
stay safe. And we are going to see you again soon in some of the webinars or meetings.
Yes, sure.
Now is a better way to get connected more than previous times.
Yes.
Okay, see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Divyang.
Bye, Amira.
Night.
Bye, Divyang.
Bye. Thank you so much.